Chapter 22, page 437, Part 2. Employee monitoring. To prevent potential health hazards to workers, OSHA has established permissible exposure limits, or PELs, for many chemicals used in sterilant and disinfectant formulations. These include ethylene oxide, E2O, hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, and ozone, O3, and others. Glutaraldehyde is a chemical commonly used in CS as a high-level disinfectant. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, or NIOSH, recommends that exposure to glutaraldehyde be under 0.2 parts per million, time-weighted average over an 8-hour work shift. The American Conference on Governmental Industrial Hygienists, ACGIH, recommends a ceiling value of 0.05 parts per million, which should not be exceeded at any time. Healthcare facilities are required by OSHA to do the following: provide adequate ventilation systems, establish safe work operating procedures, provide PPE, implement other methods to ensure that occupational exposure limits are not exceeded in the workplace. Mechanical monitoring systems can aid in the detection of chemicals present in the work area. These systems can detect the presence of chemicals at levels far below the level an employee would be able to detect by smell. See Figure 22.13. Personal monitors that measure individual exposure to chemical vapors by measuring the presence of specific chemicals in the employee's breathing zone are also available. See Figure 22.14. Fire hazards. Fire requires 3 elements to be present at the same time. These elements make up the fire triangle: a combustible or flammable substance, a source of oxygen, a source of ignition. To prevent fires, at least one of the elements in the triangle must be eliminated. See Figure 22.15. Fire and explosions. A fire occurs when the temperature of a flammable or combustible substance is raised high enough for the individual carbon and hydrogen atoms to combine with oxygen, and the resulting energy is released. If the material is a solid, it will burn only at its surface. In contrast, if the material is a volatile liquid, such as alcohol, which readily vaporizes, or a gas such as E2O, the flame front passes quickly through the substance. The result is an explosion accompanied by the instantaneous generation of large quantities of heated gas. Their rapid expansion creates a very loud pressure wave that can cause great damage. Combustible loading is the weight of combustible materials per square foot of area where the materials are located. Definitions: combustible, a substance that, if ignited, will react with oxygen and burn. Combustible loading, the weight of combustible materials per square foot of area in which those materials are located. Disposable materials, including gowns, caps, masks, shoe covers, tubing, syringes, and their packages, contribute to heavy combustible loads in the hospitals. This problem occurs principally in central storage areas such as CS, in the operating room, delivery suites, nursing units, and trash handling facilities. The presence of large volumes of combustible material and flammable substances pose unique risks. The large combustible load created by single-use items and their wrappings in storage and as trash is specifically and especially dangerous. When these materials burn, large quantities of highly toxic smoke are produced. even with hospital compartmentalization features that limit the spread of smoke and fire, a high-risk situation occurs. Therefore, healthcare fire safety programs must include the following: minimization of the combustible load, fire response plans, early detection, containment of the fire and combustible products. Containment of the fire and combustible products, extinguishment, evacuation plans. Minimize combustible loads. It is important to minimize the volume of a combustible substances because a prime rule of fire protection is don't give fire a place to start. Strategies to minimize combustible loads include: ensure that the single-use items are safely stored by keeping them in areas with the proper temperature and humidity. Minimize the volume of combustible substances even when adequate storage facilities are variable. Consider purchase systems in which the supplier retains possession of, but not the title to, items until actually needed. Minimize trash buildup. Each facility must have an adequate trash handling program that includes covered trash containers of non-combustible construction and adequate volume at each site of trash generation. Fire response plan. Every healthcare facility requires a comprehensive fire response plan, and each staff member in every department must know his or her specific role in these plans. The fire safety emphasis should begin at the time of new employee orientation and should continue with ongoing training. Every healthcare facility is required to have and maintain sprinkler systems, smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, and audible alarms to warn and protect staff and patients. See Figure 22.16. Each CS technician must participate in their facility's fire training and become aware of the fire safety items within their work area. Carefully following the facility's fire plan is important for both safety and patient safety, staff and patient safety. When a fire emergency occurs, everyone must understand their role and act quickly. Workplace violence. According to OSHA, approximately 2 million people are victims of workplace violence each year. All employees should pay attention to possible warning signs, and they should do the following: immediately report any direct threats of violence or retaliation to management. Note behavior, statements, or attitudes that are unusual, threatening, or disconcerting. Employees should be aware of their facility's specific policies on workplace violence and attend education programs designed to provide information on prevention and response. Workplace violence. Defined. Workplace violence is any act or threat of physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or other threatening, disruptive behavior that occurs at the work site. Area-specific safety concerns. There are safety concerns that are common in specific work areas within the CS department. See Figure 22.17. 22.17 shows a sign notifying personnel about the need for PPE in the decontamination area. Soils receiving and decontamination areas. Safety tips when working in soiled receiving and decontamination areas include: never reach into a basin or container holding contaminated objects unless the objects in the basin are clearly visible. Use a sponge forceps to grasp the objects or pour out any solution that prohibits visual examination, and then remove objects from basins or containers one at a time. Never use foaming detergents when handling contaminated instruments in the decontamination sink, as foam can prevent visualization of sharp objects. See Figure 22.18. Never reach into trash containers or sharps containers. Use extreme caution when disarming scalpel blades. Do not attempt to do so without training. Never disarm by hand. Always use a needle holder or tool specifically designed to remove blades. See Figure 22.19. When processing reusable sharps, separate them from other instruments and position them in a manner that protects anyone who may handle them. Follow the manufacturer's recommendations for safe use of chemicals. Always wear recommended PPE to protect all skin surfaces and mucous membranes from chemical burns. Follow the manufacturer's recommendations for safe operation or cleaning and testing equipment. Use caution when walking and inspect the floor for slippery surfaces. Utilize mats and non-skid footwear. See Figure 22.20. When cleaning instruments in a sink, always scrub below the surface of the water to avoid formation of aerosols. See Figure 22.21. Definition: aerosol. A suspension of ultra-microscopic solid or liquid particles in air or gas, a spray. Finally, sinks and other working surfaces should be at levels to afford easy access and reduce back and arm strain. Preparation and sterilization areas. Safety tips when working in preparation and sterilization areas include: move sterilizer carts to low, no traffic or other designated areas so co-workers will be less likely to come in contact with hot carts. See Figure 22.22. Use thermal insulated gloves when handling steam sterilizer carts, washer baskets, and other objects subjected to high temperatures. See Figure 22.23. Keep sterilizer door closed when not loading or unloading the chamber to protect coworkers from coming in contact with the hot inner door. See Figure 22.24. Use caution when using heat sealers. Keep away from heated components. Be sure to follow manufacturer's instructions. Be cautious when using a cutting edge to prepare paper or plastic packs. Be cautious when testing instruments for sharpness. When lifting instrument sets, use the larger muscles in the legs and arms. Hold the items as close to the body as possible without actually touching the body. Follow procedures for using and disposing of biological indicators. Ensure the proper signs and labels are posted to warn of hot surfaces and other hazards. Sterilizer safety. Steam sterilizers. Use caution to avoid burns when working with steam sterilizers. Hydrogen peroxide sterilizer safety. Use caution when handling H2O2 containers. Damaged containers may release sterilant into the work area. Again, H2O2 is hydrogen peroxide. Ethylene oxide sterilizer safety. E2O2 has been strongly regulated by the federal government for many years. In 1984, OSHA established a 1 parts per million in air PEL and a 0.5 ppm action level, or AL, for E2O. PEL again is permissible exposure limit. Note, AL is the concentration level of airborne E2O in or at breathing level. The permissible exposure limit and AL action level limits are expressed as an 8-hour time-weighted average, TWA. They represent the total allowable workable exposure during an 8-hour period and express it as an average exposure during the period. Action level, AL, defined. Level of exposure to a harmful substance or other hazard at which an employer must take required precautions to protect the workers. It is normally 1/2 the permissible exposure limit. In 1988, OSHA amended its rule on occupational exposure to E2O by adding a 5 parts per million short-term exposure limit, STEL, short-term exposure limit, over a 15-minute period. The short-term exposure limit is typically related to tasks such as transferring or handling of non-aerated goods and performing sterilizer maintenance. Definition: short-term exposure limit, or STEL. The maximum concentration of a chemical to which workers may be exposed continuously for up to 15 minutes without danger to health or work efficiency and safety. Common terms: OSHA, E2O, PEL, TWA, AL, and STEL. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, has established several limits on occupational exposure to ethylene oxide, ETO. A permissible exposure limit, PEL, is the average concentration of a chemical in the air to which a worker can be legally exposed over a particular period of time, usually 8 hours. The PEL for E2O is 1 part per million, ppm, as an 8-hour time-weighted average, TWA. An action level, AL, is the concentration level of airborne ETO in or at breathing level. A short-term excursion limit, STEL, is the maximum concentration of an airborne chemical to which a worker may be exposed over a 15-minute period. OSHA has adopted a STEL of 5 parts per million for ETO. Sterilizer manufacturers now include many safety features on E2O sterilizers. These include negative pressure air flow to help prevent any exposures if the unit malfunctions during the cycle, and automatic mechanisms keep the sterilizer locked down until the aeration cycle is completed. Safety precautions when working with E2O equipment include: E2O sterilization should be performed in a separate area from other department work areas. Healthcare facilities using ETO must have an operational dedicated ventilation system to remove fumes from exhausted during the cycle. This exhaust system should be checked regularly to ensure that any fumes in the employee's breathing zones are captured. It is also necessary to have an audible and visual alarm that will sound in case of a malfunction. ETO canisters should be stored in an approved containment locker. Check local regulations for maximum amount of canisters allowed in the area. See Figure 22.25. Compliance with all federal, state, and local air quality and worker safety regulations related to employee safety, discharge, air monitoring, and record keeping. The exposure of any person to ETO must be reported immediately to the CS manager, employee health nurse, emergency department, or employee health service. Supply, receiving, breakout, and storage areas. To ensure a safe and efficient supply receiving area, adequate storage space and traffic access must be available. Supply, storage, and shelving units must be secure and steady. Shelves should be arranged to facilitate maximum space efficiency and allow employees easy access to supplies. Heavy materials and items used most frequently should be placed on middle shelves to enable them to be easily and safely assessed by employees or accessed by employees. Lighter and infrequently used items should be placed on higher shelves. Employees should use appropriate equipment, for example, steps, stands, and ladders, to safely reach upper shelves. Climbing on shelves is not acceptable. Procedures for the safe operation of dollies, hand trucks, or carts to handle bulk materials must be available, and employees must be trained to consistently comply with them. See Figure 22.26. Closed trash containers should be available to properly dispose of unwanted materials. Containers for the appropriate storage of hazardous or flammable materials must be readily available to avoid exposure to hazardous substances. Employees working in this area must also follow proper procedures when disposing of and removing hazardous materials. SDS must be available for reference where these substances are used. Safety tips for supply receiving, breakout, and storage areas include: use caution when removing items from storage units or shelves. Allow time to perform these tasks and ensure adequate space is available to maneuver the item being received. When using a box cutting tool, always cut away from the body or to the side. Retract the blade into the handle or cover the blade with a sheath when the device is not in use. Scalpels should not be used. Avoid twisting and jerking movements when picking up or removing objects from tight spaces. Inspect work areas for objects left in pathways or equipment with parts that protrude into traffic pathways. Aisles and doorways must be kept clear at all times. Perform appropriate stretching exercise prior to work to avoid injuries to the back and other areas affected by lifting, pushing, and pulling. Use transport carts when possible to minimize lifting and carrying. Equipment storage areas and equipment transportation. Areas where supplies and equipment are stored awaiting requests from patient care areas can also be dangerous. These areas can have substantial activity and often have limited space to move about freely. Many types of patient care equipment require electrical charging, so multiple electrical outlets must be available. See Figure 22.27. All portable electrical equipment, including items used in CS and patient care areas, must comply with applicable electrical codes. Adequate storage space should be provided, and shelving should be of adequate capacity and strength. Rugged, easily controlled carts should be provided for transferring items. Transporting supplies and equipment through the facility can pose several safety concerns. CS technicians must be aware of their surroundings and take extra care to help ensure they keep themselves and those around them as safe as they perform their duties. Food service and patient transportation devices, such as gurneys and wheelchairs, may be in use in patient care areas. There may be hallway corners and elevators that present hazards if proper techniques are not used by employees transporting patients and other items. Safety tips include the following. Avoid excessive speed. Be prepared to stop quickly if a person steps into the hallway from a doorway. Always yield to patients. Use caution when approaching doorways, hallways, elevators, and high traffic areas. Do not use a transport vehicle to push or prop open automatic doors. Carts and mobile equipment should not be packed in hallways where it may block traffic or door access. Always keep hallways clear for free flow of traffic. See Figure 22.28. When transporting carts or equipment, make certain that the path in front and on each side of the transport equipment is visible. Inspect floors for uneven surfaces or defective tiles or edges to ensure the equipment being transported will not be thrown off balance. Use caution when approaching corners or intersections of hallways. Use safety mirrors whenever possible. Use caution when pushing objects up or down hallway inclines. Push from behind when going up an incline. Objects go first. And pull from in front of an object when transporting down an incline. Person goes first. Do not ride or step on wheeled supply carts or other vehicles. Consider using powered carts for moving heavy or awkward loads, if available. See Figure 22.29. Conclusion of Chapter 22, Part 2, page 445.